Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Modern Business Operations. My name is Sagi. I'm the CEO and founder of Tonkin, and today I have the pleasure of hosting Stephany, the founder and CEO of TealBook. Stephany, so good to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Well, before we jump into a lot of exciting content, maybe start with telling us a little bit about yourself, how you start the company, what is TealBook, and kind of a little bit of your background.
Sure. How much time do we have? I'm just kidding. I'm originally from Quebec, French Canadian. Left Quebec a long time ago to become a ski instructor, actually on the West Coast. And then went to university, learned English. That worked out well. Always want to be an entrepreneur. I come from a long family of entrepreneurs. Probably most well known, my grandfather started Pepsi in Quebec and passed away fairly young. So my grandmother ended up taking over the bottling and distribution of Pepsi Cola back in the, I think, 50s or 60s. So I grew up with this iconic woman who was quite strong, very feminine, but also a boss lady, and raised 3 kids while building Pepsi Cola and attending a lot of different community events, being Pepsi. So I think that was a pretty big inspiration for me as I grew up. And I'd always had these business ideas, a million business ideas. Started my first company when I was 18. It was focused on corporate events, sold that to become a ski bum, and then went to university. And I ended up working in startup environments in the early stage of my career. Also had the opportunity to work for a data company that was quite well established and saw just the power and information and the value of having data, which to me was very subjective on the value of who's consuming the data. So I thought that was really interesting. Started my first business in 2006, consulting. So very, low sort of capital to start, made that business profitable in the first few years. And that business really focused on helping large organizations initially find innovation. And so any stakeholders of any function looking for innovations, it could be marketing, it's been packaging, it's been supply chain, it's been even, I worked a lot in pharmaceutical, where it's clinical trial, anything that was innovative, that was happening and could impact the business in a positive way. I became a bit of a matchmaker. So the company was called Matchbook. And a lot of my clients start seeing this process that looked a lot like strategic sourcing and procurement, because it was all about understanding the problem that we're looking to solve, looking for third-party providers that had solved similar challenges for other organizations or had some ideas of how to solve the business challenge, and then coming to the table to present. Ultimately, one of the partners would be selected and start working with the client. And so a lot of my customers start asking, could you help us improve our strategic sourcing function? Because we're trying to move from being more spend management and procurement to be more value add. And so I started building basically strategic sourcing function. So I fell into this space. The business evolved. A lot of my contacts went to companies that were raising a lot of capital, especially at the time in the biotech space. And so a lot of my contacts would call me and say, hey, we need everything. We're building our entire commercial infrastructure. We need every supplier that can support a global, biotech company. And so sort of fell into building procurement functions, which we ended up calling it more of a third-party optimization, because most companies at that stage don't like procurement. They think procurement is putting roadblock in processes, when in fact, I saw an opportunity to make the process of engaging the right supplier as one of the biggest, competitive advantage to a company. And as we were building procurement function, I started seeing that there's a lot of software. People want to do good things and a lot of process, which then hindered speed and scale. And I started seeing that there's a big problem around information about those suppliers that very quickly became siloed and disparate across all the different systems and tools that were implemented to automate contract or payments or invoicing or sourcing or third-party risk management. And so we ended up with a very difficult architecture with data living in a bunch of places and limited possibility to then optimize this investment made in suppliers to drive business objectives. And so anyway, long story, I spent 9 years, and you can edit, you don't need to have the whole background, but I spent 9 years killing the idea of TealBook, finally put the pieces together. What the big differentiator was, what I saw an opportunity to solve this data problem in a way that technology could enable the automation of data quality when it comes to third-party providers. Today, it's still done very manually. A lot of dependencies on suppliers to come to multiple portals, a lot of time spent reviewing third-party data, trying to reconcile with the master data just to get a trusted spend reporting. That takes time, it's recurring, and it's very limited. And so what we've been focused on is really making quality data accessible to any enterprise and feed a consistent high quality record to all the different functions across the life cycle of a third-party provider. And that could be procurement, could be supply chain, logistic, compliance, payments, third-party risk, ESG. It's typically the same information that's needed to be provided to all these different systems, also optimizing the investment made in analytics tools, because with better data, you get better insight, and so on and so forth. So that's been the mission, 9 years now, using AI to improve quality data on suppliers at a scale that, to this date has not been able to achieve.
Right on time, I guess. It's been 9 years in the making, but it feels like this is really where a lot of the things I've even seen in podcasts, where folks spending time in their interests is. So I wanted to kind of maybe follow up on a couple of things there. I guess the first thing that comes to mind, it almost feels like there was the first renaissance and the second renaissance when it comes to data. It was like, first decade of data who, data what do you mean by data kind of thing. And then now it feels like, you kind of threw AI there too. And like there's a lot of different things comes together. And one of the things I wanted to connect to is the strategic aspect of, for example, procurement. And I had a great guest in the podcast just a few weeks ago that talked about the shift in also how procurement teams see themselves. And I've seen it in other departments as well. There's that maybe even a natural way for us as technology becomes better for us to kind of rethink our roles and where do we stand as people, right? And like what are we bringing to the table? And so I feel like it all kind of comes together, right? So people are trying to be more strategic. Technology gets better with AI and stuff. And so, not to put words in your mouth, but you're saying, okay, but now the data needs to be better. And so maybe talk a little bit about, that the market conditions right now, maybe compared to where it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and where do you see like this continue to grow?
Well, so if you think of data itself, break down any process today that you're in your business. I apologize. In your business, sorry. So think about any process in your organization today where data is important to collect. And so one of the use cases that we started with was supplier diversity. And so if you're an organization that do business with small, diverse businesses, and you may be regulated, you may be getting funded from the government, there may be incentive, it may be something that you've made a promise to your shareholders that you have to report. The process itself of finding the vendor master, cleaning the vendor master, figuring out how many suppliers are duplicates in your system, figuring out which of your suppliers may be small and diverse, getting the contact information of those suppliers, contacting those suppliers for them to come and put a certificate in a portal, right? Validating a certificate. We're talking about many, many, many manual steps just to achieve a diversity report, right, that you can report with confidence to your shareholders. That's really hard. And so what we've applied is like, okay, how do you use this manual process and you apply automation? Can you use AI to solve this problem? What also happens that AI technology that are customer facing or stakeholder facing, like talk about ChatGPT right now, lots and lots of buzz around that. Well, you need to have data that you trust to be able to answer business questions using those technologies. And if your foundation is not good quality, then you're not going to be able to trust the insight. And so, there's sort of two angles to this. There's the AI, which you can solve for the data, which is what we're doing. So how can you use AI to collect all this information, right? How do you unify to the right supplier? How do you validate the quality of that data using AI? How do you help customers have more transparency, more flexibility in the data that they need and distribute across their system is what we solve for. And then there's the application of AI that relies on good data quality. what we've seen is a big shift. And one, like 5 years ago, we were doing webinars on AI and ML, like what it is, how it can be used. Like we don't have to do this anymore. Like I mean, it's been amazing from an industry perspective, but there's still a lot of education at the enterprise level. Like what we hear often is like, oh, we've bought BI tools, we get lots of data, like lots of insight. But what's the quality of your data? And they go, well, it's 3 out of 10. Or usually I start with that. What's the quality of your supplier data? They'll go 3 out of 10 or 4 out of 10. And then they tell me they've got all these amazing analytics tools. Or they now are able to use a chat GPT within their enterprise environment that's sitting on a data lake that's pulling data from all their systems. And you're assuming now that your system have good data quality, which is not the case. And so I think it's a lot of education right now, and data is not analytics. Analytics depends on good data, right? And then if you're going to leverage some of those really cool, powerful tools, it's okay to not have great data when you need something that's directionally correct. Or if you want to use a technology to review contracts that is tangible, structured data, you can do it. But when you want to answer fundamental business question that there's a lot at stake, you need to have trust in the information. So a big shift in AI, really, we're super excited at what's happening because it just provides more education to the market and how companies can actually start leveraging these technologies within their environment. Obviously, for us, COVID was a huge accelerator because a lot of enterprise had information on spend. How much are they spending with suppliers, even though it's still kind of hard? They've automated invoices through source to pay systems. So they had some kind of visibility into spend. But then when something like COVID happens, spend doesn't really matter. Risk becomes way more important. How to find alternative suppliers so to ensure business continuity. In a lot of cases, how do you find PPEs to keep your employees safe so they come to work so that you can deliver product to your customers, right? And so suddenly it was like, oh my God, we need, and then ESG came as okay, now we're setting up a target for carbon emission. Black Lives Matter happened. Suddenly we need, to report on which businesses do we do business that are, Black owned, woman owned, veteran owned, et cetera. And now you got Germany with, there's this new act where you have to have visibility in your tier 2, your tier 3 suppliers, which you don't even know who your tier 1 suppliers are yet. So it's really, I think all of this added regulations, these events have just propelled the need for information, and procurement or supply chain or other functions that need the value is not in the doing of the data. The value is in having trusted information to deliver better business outcome faster, right? And so when we talk about, procurement getting a seat at the table, or deliver value, be insightful, right? Influence business decisions, influence revenue, innovation, mitigate risk, help your organization achieve your ESG targets, to use that as a competitive advantage. Like there's so many possibilities. It's like procurement's been seen as like, oh, procurement's just, saving money and we're just sourcing in procurement, when in fact, like, we're seeing billions of dollars in spend. Like there's a huge amount of levers and that spend that you're not optimizing because you have no real visibility, and you can't leverage your buying power to influence those decisions because you don't know who you do business with at scale.
What's interesting to me is that it's a constant tension. And we play the my company. I mean, we play the automation, orchestration of business processes, and I think what I've seen and kind of resembles something you mentioned is where there's this tension between, okay, what does it take you to get to a desired result? And you mentioned the the insights out of the business intelligence tools. I think it's such a clean, simple, example of that concept. You're like, what are you looking for? You're looking for the insights, but sometimes you kind of you almost need to zigzag. You need to get to a point where you see what can be, and in your point, even with shitty data, okay, now you kind of see okay, I can, that might be able to answer those things. Wait, it can actually answer those because I don't have the data. Now I can go back and kind of look at the data. And I feel like that is similar to the another point you made about what is the actual process look like. And guess what? There's 10 different manual steps there, which to me, it's funny with people are afraid that AI is going to take people's job. And I was like, it will take a job, but what part of the job it will take? Trust me, it's not the part that you want to do. It's this is do you really want to combine those and clean the data and combine those, that data sheets together? Like, that's not actually what you want to do when you think about yourself as an analyst, for example. So it's, so what is the actual sort of like baseline that is needed to get to the outcome? And I think I do agree with how you described it. I personally feel like there is a conversion of where the best case scenario, sort of like visionary ideas that have been pitched for like honestly 20 years now, is in a position that it can be done, not only because, again, AI or technology, because AI has been here for a while. Like ChatGPT is not the first time that you see AI. It is the first time that something super popular and tangible came out of it, that people can see. People don't think about Netflix recommendation engine as AI, although obviously it is. So that tangible thing allows people to dream different and be like, wow, wait, you tell me that I can use technology to answer questions about my business? And you're like, yeah, great. What do I need? What I need now to do that? And sometimes that's easier than the opposite, right? Because, I think folks in our side of the industry trying to make companies better, processes better, work better, had to push a lot of those education into, look, you really need to get a hold of your processes, in my case, data in your case, where without it you won't be able to get insight, you won't be able to do this and that. So you had to kind of not convince, but like educate.
Catalyst. So one of our customers, Catalyst, was the CEO. It's a large financial services company. The CEO was meeting with another CEO of a large bank and asked the team, how much money are we spending with them before the discussion? And the procurement team couldn't get the answer on time, right? They had the data residing in different systems. They had multiple instances of the supplier, so they couldn't give a confident answer. And the CEO was like, also, can you let me know how much money we're spending with them? Like, she wanted the AR data, which was not owned by procurement. And so they couldn't figure out how to get the AR data to then match to the spend data of this one entity on time for a business meeting that was really important to CEO. And they failed. Like, we have failed to deliver value to our organization. And then they embarked into this journey of fixing this problem. And it's basic stuff, right? It's like, how many suppliers do you have? I had a chief procurement officer last week that told me that out of $8 billion, they have $1.2 billion of uncategorized spend. They have no idea what they're spending money on. Sure, it could be a margin error, but the majority of those suppliers on that uncategorized spend are probably small businesses. You're not spending a ton of money, otherwise you would know them better. And that's the biggest source of risk to your organization, especially when you're thinking about cybersecurity risk and others. It's also the biggest source of innovation. It's also the biggest lever for you to be able, if you're able to save $400 million out of that $1.2 billion of spend, how would that impact your bottom line, right? Like, there's so much quality levers within what you don't know. And it's been too hard to date to be able to keep up with, because there's so much information. There's so many suppliers that we've been, the industry's been very selective. Oh, let's focus on 20% of our spend, right? The other suppliers, we don't care right now. We just don't have the bandwidth. And just to get a good grasp of this information, it takes a lot of time. And all these other processes for ESG, for risk, et cetera, it's all, built into this Frankenstein architecture to address all these different business problems. But now it's changed, right? Like, now you can actually get better information about your suppliers and give your organization like just more trust in the quality of the information. And then you can power all these different bells and whistles that you've put in place. But you're going to get a lot more out of those systems if they have better data quality. It'll drive better compliance. Like, all those things will have a massive impact. So the impact and ROI you can get from just establishing a strong data foundation is, it's almost hard to grasp because it's in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And so, but yeah, a catalyst, like, what's that business question that you can't answer right now because you don't have quality information? That's a really good way to just put a more tangible sort of outcome to the business, to build the investment or justify the investment and getting better data.
Yeah, and I think expectation is changing or has changed. Like I think I can see myself in the shoes of that CEO waiting for the data and getting really, really upset that they couldn't get it on time. The
And we're talking about a Fortune 100.
Yeah, it's like
right. We're not talking about like a mom and pop, which there's a lot of those, right? If you're working in a company, it's we have another client who's growing 5 times because they're a lithium mining company. So every electric car need lithium. They're building the infrastructure to be able to produce enough or be able to get enough lithium in the hands of their customers. I mean, the infrastructure doesn't even exist. They're spending so much money, but it's over 100-year-old company. Like the change management is so astronomical. And when they think, we'll implement an ERP and a source to pay, that's old thinking. Yes, you're going to need this, but start by building a really strong data foundation because it's going to direct your strategy. It's going to make the implementation of these systems so much faster from a value perspective. Like you're going to enable people to have access to information that they need to do their job. You're going to attract way better talent because they don't want to do the mind-numbing work of like reviewing data, in a spreadsheet. They want to be able to access the information they need to deliver better outcomes. And so there's a huge impact. And honestly, it's been 8 years and I'm still as passionate as I was when I started, which is shocking because as you know, as a founder, it's really freaking hard to build a tech company, especially when you're a little bit ahead of the market, trying to convince the world that, this really actually matters. There's a huge impact, but I'm passionate because the market has kept validating. And just last week, I'm attending this conference. We're talking about the biggest companies in the world in the audience, mostly procurement or IT/supply chain procurement. And I ask, use your 10 fingers to give me honest truth about the quality of the information that you have on your third-party providers. And all these companies have in the tens to hundreds of thousands of suppliers globally. And so it was like 2, 3, some put 5 and they look around, they're like 2, right? And we're talking about hundreds of people in the audience. And then I asked them, okay, raise your hand if you believe that having good quality information about your third-party provider is absolutely critical to your transformation or delivering, your business outcome. And 100% of the room raise their hands. Like we have a big data problem. And it's not solved by connecting all your systems to a data lake. It's not solved by a bunch of consultants your data over and over again. It's you have to leverage technology. It exists. You don't have to do this the hard way anymore. And then, a lot of other things will fall into place, but that's one area that you can have a big impact.
Nice. Well, I resonate with a lot of it. We're also been running for about 8 years now. And shaping the market is not an easy task. So I salute you for that too.
I salute you back.
Speaking of, of hardships and hard learnings, and I always like to ask, is there any good advice you got through your career or things you would want to pay forward? It can be recent thing, can be, a long time advice.
I think we don't celebrate enough the entrepreneurs. As an audience, your audience being people in operations roles. As a startup founder, I couldn't not have built this business if some people on the customer side could believe in the vision and took a chance and took some risk and wanted to collaborate and didn't expect perfection and had the ability to shape our product. And when that happens and it comes with a logo and a revenue, even though the revenue doesn't have to be crazy, but any revenue we can put on our book so that we can show investors that we've closed a deal, we have the logo, a customer was willing to pay for it, even if it's in a sort of a co-innovation format, and then having the input from that client as we're building a product, it's so massively valuable. And if you're working a large enterprise, especially a lot of people are very attractive to the thought of going to a startup. It's the best way to dip your toe with the comfort of your salary and your benefit, but get a bit of a taste of being in a startup. And so if I could pay it forward by encouraging people in operations to, spend time with entrepreneurs, they're contagious with their energy and their passion and their beliefs. They had enough conviction to take an enormous amount of risk to build their business and hire people and raise capital. So at least they deserve, even if it's half an hour to 45 minutes of your time, if the solution is not for you, help them navigate your organization to get in front of the right audience. If you think there's interest in solving a business problem, or it could solve a business problem, make the suggestion. Doesn't mean they're going to take you up on it, but it may be worth a shot. And yeah, I think it's the best impact you can have on startup, and it produces better product and allows us to get funding, and allows, ultimately, you're going to get the benefit to be a thought leader in the space, to be able to achieve business outcome faster and be competitive. And it's something you have on your resume that you can replicate with other companies in the future. So yeah, if that message is paying forward to all the entrepreneurs and the entrepreneurs out there, then hopefully I've made some, my good deed of the day.
Well, this is spot on. I think the one thing I would add to it is that it is actually one of the best ways for folks in big companies to get promoted and to get visibility within the company and to raise above their rank, is to bring innovation and take a bet. And I think you touch on something that I think most people don't understand, or it's just not being taught maybe, or not as commonly celebrated in general culture, is you gotta take a risk, and it is risky to go and invest thousands of dollars, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars in a small startup. Can be scary, can be risky, but that's also where the potential of the reward is real. The metric I'm most proud of, in our company, we measure how many of our champions get promoted after they buy Tonkin. And to me, this is just a signal of the impact that is sometimes more important than immediate ROI, because it shows that type of bets that those people made are aligned with the strategy of the company. And so I think, we've never talked about it, but I think it's a really good point to bring to light, and salute those people that do take those chances, but also that encourage that this is actually a good way, very even practical way to get promoted and get progress in your career, as well as, like you said, if you want to dip your toe. So yeah, great advice. Well, this was a lot of fun. I really appreciate you coming on. It's fun to also I don't have often other founder CEOs in the show, so it's a great conversation. So I really appreciate it. If people want to follow up on TealBook or with you personally, is that LinkedIn, X? Where is it?
Yeah, so it's Stephany with a Y. If usually LinkedIn me with a Y, I come up typically at the top, so Stephany Lapierre. If you're interested in data, supply chain, data foundation, AI, follow me. If not, don't, because I do post a lot. And then TealBook.com, if you're interested in learning more about our technology, please, reach out, contact our team. There's a lot of resources, lots of great presentations recently on stage with the likes of Goldman Sachs, Albemarle, NASDAQ, and others. And so there's a lot of great content to learn sort of how they've leveraged our technology to drive business impact and why this matters to them from a business outcomes perspective.
Awesome. Well, Stephany, congrats on all the success, and thank you again for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.